The FujiCast is an independent loading zone production.
Wednesday, 27th of May.
The FujiCast.
Welcome to the FujiCast. Once weekly, now daily, but only for a limited amount time more, because on Sunday, Kev, that's our final one of the dailies. I say for the moment because you never know, do you? Life's a funny old thing, as we've found out in the last 3 or 4 months. Although if the daily were ever to come back as myself and Kev, I'd want it to be in very different circumstances, not because we don't find ourselves with a lot to do on our hands or anything. So, but there we go. How are you today, Kev? I'm
okay. I just had a very pleasant webinar with a bunch of photographers from the Philippines. Very pleasant they were.
All right. Okay. Well, so it was a web. Did it have any particular subject, this webinar, or was it just a hangout, or?
Yeah, it was just somebody got in touch with me on Instagram. Somebody I've chatted to before, and said, there's a whole load of people over here. We'd love to hear from you. And I was like, okay, let's do it. So we just did it.
Brilliant. So what were they doing? So, throwing questions at the Mullins?
Yeah, I went through a little presentation, showed some work, talked about how I did my editing and all that other stuff, and then we had a little bit of a Q&A and a little group chat and stuff. Yeah, it was very nice.
What time was it in the... because they're ahead, aren't they, by a reasonable amount? So they stayed up late to spend some time with Mullins?
Probably about 11 o'clock their time now. Yeah, midnight, yeah.
Well, that's good. How many were there? Were there quite a few in there, or...?
I think it was 11 or 12.
Oh, yeah. That's good. I do know, it's always, I think above 11 or 12, it gets a bit difficult to handle, doesn't it, to be honest?
Yeah, well, they were all very, very good because they all turned their videos off and muted themselves while I did my thing. And then at the end, we had a little Q&A. So, yeah, that was really good.
Perfect.
Really good. Really nice people.
Right, well, we've got a book today, so we'll have a look at your books that you should buy when it's safe to come out and spend money again feature, which seems only just round the corner for some people are already there, and for the rest of us, we're getting there. So let's do some questions first. Mike Mullaney, you may have talked about this at some point, but I can't remember. It's almost like it felt initially like it really belonged on a Tech Free Tuesday, but Tech Free Tuesday is now having gone. I wanted to mention it, but equally it gives me an opportunity to bring up this idea about tribes in photography, Kev. So you may have talked about this at some point, but I can't remember. I wanted to know what brought the two of you together. You both must have met so many photographers in the wedding industry, and you may have thought, well, I wouldn't mind working with them again, and of course the opposite. So how did you two meet, and why did you stay in touch? Kevin had Neil's work on one of his presentations, I think. I can't remember.
I definitely used to show your work at my presentations.
I think it was was it the other way around? I thought it was
no.
Kevin had Neil's work.
I used to show, whenever I used to do my workshops and presentations, I always used to start by talking about you, some pictures from you, some pictures from James Revilius, some pictures from Elliot Irwitt.
That feels a bit. It's a bit self-indulgent that I said it like that, because I'm sure I used to talk about you on my workshops as well. But we did meet up. We met at various workshops that we went to. I always remember, I think, sitting next to you, sharing ice cream at the Joe Busink thing in Bristol.
That was after we met. I think, did we not both know Alistair Freeman mutually beforehand?
I think so, yeah. Because now that brings me neatly on, and this is why I wanted to mention it, Mike. About having tribes in photography and people that you have shared opinions with and shared values with. And I'm not just talking about business referral groups, because I think that's the obvious one that most people initially think, isn't it, Kev? They think, right, have a referral group, we'll all give each other some money. But I think sometimes we belong in particular to one Facebook group.
Yeah, I always laugh at the word tribes. I know it's a very marketing. I think it was Seth Godin, wasn't it, or somebody who kind of coined that originally. But yeah, tribes.
But no, it's not just Seth that uses it. As there's a few people that use it now.
Of course, it's a well-known marketing kind of colloquialism.
I'm using it now, but all right, let's call it groups. But it is, I think, finding groups like we did with Alistair. And the Facebook group that we have with other people as well, where we feel that we can communicate without it, we can talk about the issues we have without being judged, is important, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would say that I've come across a couple of people in my wedding photography career who who have never really understood that the power of collectively being together. It's always been about not sharing, not telling anybody else, and always being negative. And those people kind of drift and disappear, really, in the end. But the ones that do get together and help each other out and support each other, whether that's just a simple Facebook group or whether it's passing business to each other or whatever, that works really well. There's a lot of good stuff out there like that.
Well, it's not so much a referral group, but I even think the FujiCast Facebook group has turned into a really good and safe place for people to share thoughts, advice, opinions. But not all groups are like that. But
No.
Anyway, thanks, Mike. Andy Stonia. Hello, guys. Thanks for the podcast. Yada, yada, yada. Wedding question, obvs, from Andy. All my couples are moving their dates to next year, quoting things like, we can ensure all our family can attend without worry. But are we just going to have the same problem in 2021 with 2020's postponed weddings realising that they can't go ahead, or if they can, not in the way that they'd envisaged? So 2020's weddings moved to 2021, now wanting to move to 2022. 2021 weddings wanting to, I get the idea, leading to me shooting 2020 weddings in 2025. Now, we had a chat about this. I had a meeting with a prospective bride and groom last night via Zoom, of course. And she was a doctor at a fairly big hospital, not so far away from where I live. And her take on it, and she has a wedding, I think it was May or was it June next year. Her feelings were that this will go, and she seemed very relaxed about it.
Well, we don't know, do we? I mean, I'm guessing, it looks like it's travelling around the globe, doesn't it? It looks like poor South Americans are getting kicked in the belly by it now.
Not having a good time, no.
And I've read several things that kind of imply that it will eventually just burn itself out, and hopefully it will. And some people have said it will be with us forever, and I'm sure that there will always be an element of it forever. But I don't know. Personally, I think that next year will be relatively normal, wedding wise, in terms of what people can do and what they can't do. And that's what I'm planning on. If it's not, we'll find out next year.
Well, did you know, by the way, because SARS and MERS were really, they were nasty. This is nasty, but they were particularly nasty, weren't they? Did you know
SARS was, yeah.
Yeah. Do you know that SARS still exists?
Yeah, of course it does.
And do you know
they all do?
I know. I kind of knew you knew that, but did you know that people do still present at hospitals in this country with SARS, even as late as recently?
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, there's things that you just can't get rid of. Look at measles, and there's even people still have bubonic plague in certain parts of the world. It's just there's something like 200,000 viruses, animal to human viruses out there. And of course, bubonic plague came from fleas on rats, didn't it? And we don't have so many rat infested places these days, so we don't have so many problems like that, but some places do. And I guess it will just be I really hope that it will just be like getting the flu again. Someone's got the flu, best not go around their house.
Well, this was interesting talking to this doctor who doesn't take things, she was very serious about the virulence of this at the moment, but she said this particular hospital she works at had dealt with SARS really quite recently, and she said it'll be here forever, but it gets less virulent. The problem with sharing that message openly at the moment, and of course I'm no expert, is that some people then take liberties, and that's not what we need at the moment.
Yes, especially people in government.
Yes. Should we move on? I love this name, by the way. David Enzel in Washington. Which is really
Why do you like that name so much?
Well, because Denzel Washington is one of my favourite actors of all time.
But his name's not Denzel.
I know, but when you say...
His name's David Enzel.
David Enzel Washington.
Oh, I see.
Maybe it's just me. But anyway...
I get it now,
Do you get it? Anyway, David, you're very welcome. It's nice to hear from you. This one's been mooted on a few occasions, but I always feel that, Kev, that things need to be updated. And of course, over this period, we know through looking at the figures of this show, a lot of new listeners have joined us, and you are very welcome. And David might be one of them. This question suggests that he might be. I know this might have been asked before, but I haven't heard your answer yet. I use Lightroom for everything, including my Fuji files. I keep reading that Lightroom does not do a good job with Fuji files. I've tried Capture One, but I'm a long-time Lightroom user and cannot get used to Capture One. I don't want to switch. Do you feel Lightroom does a good job, please, with the Fuji files? Or should I flee Lightroom due to the alleged worms that people keep talking about? We've talked about the alleged worms quite a lot on this show.
Well, we have. So we probably don't need to go into too much detail, but my advice really is if you can see them said alleged worms in your pictures, then probably investigate something else. If you can't, don't.
You like,
and I don't. Yeah. I can't see them. I never see them.
No, I'm having a try. No, I don't shoot landscape. I don't zoom into my images quite as much as some people might with certain genres. So that's where the problem is, isn't it, Kev? If you're a photojournalist, street shooter, wedding shooter, if you're doing that kind of work, you're not likely to be troubled by this worm issue, are you?
Well, honestly, I have seen people show screenshots of it, but I've never seen it in my pictures. I think it tends to be on the older versions of Lightroom as well. Now, like certainly the last kind of year or so, they've done a lot of work with the way that they deal with Fuji X-Trans images. Yeah. And they also have a specific tool in Lightroom now called fine detail or something, or refine detail, which actually even goes ahead and makes them even sharper and all that kind of stuff without affecting the details. So, yeah, I mean, if you're, I don't know, it really, this has become like the Mac and Windows debate. This has, you run the risk of people really getting the hump and saying, no, you're completely wrong because Lightroom is terrible. And perhaps it is for them, but for me it's not, and it's by far an easier workflow by a country mile workflow.
And I remember at the start of lockdown, we're only about 2 or 3 weeks into lockdown, and you said, right, I'm going to sit there, I'm going to learn Capture One, and I thought that was it. Kev's off to Capture One. But I did learn it, and I learned that it wasn't for me. Yeah. I'm afraid, not in this iteration. It doesn't have the mobile stuff I like to use. It's just very quirky. Yeah. You can't do straightening of things very easily. The cropping is awkward, and I'm not saying it's not a very, very good application. I know it is. I know people. Wayne Johns uses it for his his editorial work, fine art work, and amazingly, and the details are there. It's clear to say, and he swears by it and says that Lightroom was never good enough for him. So, there must be something in it. But for me, nope, I'm more than happy. Not for you. It's much easier much easier for workflow Lightroom for me. Jeremy Baker, hi Kevin, hi Neil. Friend of the show now, Jeremy Baker. I think you've earned that title now. Blah, blah, blah. Love the podcast. Blah, blah, blah. Both deserve recognition. Blah. My questions. What rules of thumb or shortcuts or mnemonics do either of you use when prepping, shooting and in post-production? E.g., safe shutter speed equals 2 times lens focal length. Is that got 3 questions actually? So we'll start with that one. Do you have any rules of thumb or shortcuts or mnemonics? I don't feel I have any.
The whole double focal length thing was, of course, is a real thing, but it doesn't mean that you can't shoot at slower shutter speeds. So effectively what they were saying were that if you had a 100mm lens and this was on a full frame equivalence, then you should be shooting at a minimum of 1/200th of a second to ensure sharpness. But of course that's very subjective as well, because it depends very much on what's happening in the scene, how fast those things are moving. And it depends on how steady your hands are.
Equally unworkable in low light sometimes, often.
But also I did used to think about that a lot when I used to shoot with my DSLRs, but as soon as I went to smaller cameras, not at all. I mean, I'm shooting 1/40th of a second. I mean, I shot a picture the other night of Albie, and it was 1/25th of a second on a GFX 100 with a 110mm lens, which goes against all of the rules.
Mind you, you've got your image stabilization on that camera, haven't you?
Well, exactly. So technology has changed and everything now. So, I mean, there are things that I go through my camera and make sure things like my auto ISO is set correctly. The dates and times across the bodies are all set correctly. I normally do all of that when I'm sat in the car just before the wedding. That's the only time I format the cards as well. up until the time I'm sat outside the wedding venue, I haven't formatted the cards I'm about to use.
Really? I suppose if you remember to do it, it's a bit like me with putting microphones on people. People say, how do you remember to do it? You just do it, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. That's the reason for it. Because if I might sit in the car and think, right, I've got to go and shoot this wedding now. And, I remember I formatted those cards yesterday and perhaps I didn't.
Yeah.
And, you start shooting and you've got 2 shots left and you've got somebody else's wedding pictures on there. So, yeah.
Sure. In terms of using the auto ISO, I speak with people sometimes who have, they've got the 3 different auto ISO levels set up. I've only ever got one, really. A sort of catch-all size, really, with lowest shutter speed, lowest, highest ISO level. Do you get complex with that and have 3 different things for 3 different scenarios?
Not overly. I do typically have mine set to the minimum, the fastest shutter speed is usually 1/125th. The minimum shutter speed is 1/125th. Highest ISO is 12,800. That's typically what I go with. But sometimes if I'm like when it gets a bit later and I need to shoot at slower shutter speeds, then rather than setting that manually with the shutter dial, I've got a separate auto ISO which will drop that down.
Right.
And also drop the ISO down to 6400 because I don't really want to be shooting at really low shutter speed at 12,800. No. And of course you can see it in the viewfinder. So if it's not working, then you can shoot manually.
Photographically, Jeremy says, what things have you stopped doing that you'd have done regularly in the past? Like techniques and style and workflow. Again, I think I've stayed fairly loyal to all the techniques and styles and my feeling about how I go into a job for a number of years now.
Yeah, same as me. I don't think anything has changed. I can't really think of anything. Yeah. I have to say. Not when it comes to weddings, anyway. I've piqued my interest in things like personal portraits and even still life. I like now, like taking pictures of plants and stuff like that. But nothing from a commercial point of view. That's remained constant.
Workflows changed slightly for me because, as I said the other day, up to only about 3 years ago, everything was manipulated using Photoshop. Nothing was done in Lightroom. I am a late adopter of Lightroom. There's no doubt about that. But and if all jobs paid the same, what would you do? We had this question in Tech Free Tuesday. So very briefly, for me, it was photography like Platon. Meeting all these incredible people and being able to talk to them and just to be immersed in their thoughts. And
I wanted to be a behind-the-scenes rugby photographer.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, and he did have a PS. Is this strap-worthy? Jeremy, which decade are you in? We stopped doing that quite some time ago, but it's nice to hear from you. One more, which is more sort of a kind of something to look at, and we'll put the link in the show notes for this, and then we're going to move on to your book. Hi, chaps. Hope you're faring well. I write because it may be of interest. I recently published a small 12-inch square zine of a little project that I want you to throw up on your screen now, Kev. Have you got it? So Yep. This is tedsmithphotography.co.uk. This is we'll put the actual address up, but this is something that he did for the COVID-19 response to help raise some money. Profits going to the Trussell Trust. And there we go. Now available as a printed book. And you liked it in particular because A, it's a book, and B, it was all shot on film, which was a challenge, of course, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's nice pictures. It's so it's London by night during the lockdown.
Yeah.
Some Tri-X, I think, just reading the website now, is shot on Hasselblad 501 CM, Tri-X 400, colour ones. What were the colour ones? The colour ones were Provia 100. Yeah, really nice. Really nice pictures, actually.
I looked at the Shard
and
one.
you can tell they're not digital as well, which is nice.
Whenever I see a picture of the Shard, it reminds me of flying back into Heathrow a few years back, and there was a low layer of cloud that day. Cloud level was very low. And sticking out the top of the clouds, there was just the top of the Shard, nothing else in London. And I didn't have anything to take a picture with.
That picture there of the shard, when the shard at night is lit up like that with its crown on, if you like, it reminds me of Beaker, the cartoon character to the Muppets. I think was it Muppets?
Do you know what? I'm looking at Ted's picture now, and you're absolutely right. It does.
I could just see Beaker stood there with his little orange head.
Never thought of that before. Anyway, Ted Smith, yes, thank you for that. We're going to put your link into the show notes today, and I really would advise you go and look at it, because there's some cracking work on there. Talking of things to go look at, there'll be a link for this as well. Book of the week, Kev. Kev's book that you can safely go out and buy when you can spend money again feature.
Book of the week, and this is one of my favourite books. And if I remember rightly, it was the one and only Matt Hart that put me in kind of direction of this book.
All right.
And there is, luckily, only one Matt Hart, for those that know him.
Yeah.
And this book is called
You'll be in trouble again.
Doing the War.
Doing the War.
There's a book. It's a book called The Brothers by a photographer called Elin Højland.
All right.
Now it's I presume he's Danish or Scandinavian of some kind. But it's a beautiful book, and I have checked. It's still available on Amazon. It's available. It's not £2,000 or anything like that. And it's about these two brothers called Harold and Matthias. And they've basically always lived together on the same small farm. Neither is married. Neither of them moved away. And the blurb of the book said that on one day, one of the brothers spent a night away from the house, and the other brother described it as the worst day of his life.
Oh God!
And it's just beautiful, and it's just portraits of these guys in their it's like a wooden cabin, I suppose. But there's like really lovely details of like the combs they use. There's pictures of their bathroom, and of course lots of portraits of them. But probably more important than the portraits is them just getting on with their daily lives, washing their hands and cooking. Outside of the shed, and it's just beautiful, all black and white, of course. And kind of there's a picture here, picture of either Harold or Matthias, whichever one it is, feeding the birds in the bird feeder. Really, really beautiful, a simple book. It's not. I mean, it's not a huge book. It's a Dewey Lewis. I always have problems pronouncing this. Dewey Lewis book. So you can either get it from deweylewispublishing.com, or you can go to Amazon. We will have a link, of course. There's a lovely, really lovely. I love the portrait of the two of them on the front cover. They just stood there. They look like twins, but they're not. Because there's 5 years between them. But they're stood there. Both got their bobble hats on, both with their tops off and their kind of corduroy trousers, and looking very, very. One of them's looking very proud that he's having his picture taken. Yeah. And the other one's looking like he's going to kill in Højland for taking his picture. But I'm sure he wasn't. And it's beautiful, really beautiful. One of my absolute favourite books.
Isn't it funny what projects spike the interest of publishers?
Yeah, I think Dewey Lewis, I mean, their stuff is amazing. A lot of the books that he's published over the years, or they've published over the years, have been, very groundbreaking documentary style stuff. And of course, he's an independent publisher, Dewey Lewis, so he's some good stuff. So check out deweylewispublishing.com as well, or you can get it from Amazon or all good bookstores, I would imagine. And from the 15th of June, you'll probably be able to go into Waterstones again.
Do you think so?
Yeah, he said, didn't you? From the 15th of June, all shops can open.
Oh, right. So did I miss that? 15th? When did they say that?
Yesterday.
Do you know what? I haven't watched the news in 24 hours.
There you go.
I spoke
yesterday. The news was on the 1st of June.
Right.
Car stores can open and outside markets. On the 15th of June, all other non-essential stores can open, and on the 16th of June, Neil James Photography is not allowed to open. That's what he said.
Well, at least I got a name check. Do you know that says a lot about my experience of the last 3 months? That at one stage I was checking the news every 5, 10, 15 minutes. And as the weeks have gone by, I've done it less and less and less. And then as the Dominic Cummings story was coming up, I was thinking, I don't want to go back into this round-robin journalism. I just can't bear it. And I literally switched off media over 24 hours ago. The only thing I learned about was by speaking to the doctor yesterday, the prospective client. That was all. Isn't that funny? Isn't that odd? Anyway, Dennis Skyam, just to finish with today. Hi, guys. I love it, by the way, Kev, as this thing has gone on, how people have gotten to know our humour. And I think Dennis Skyam, now you can officially be a friend of the show, Dennis, is kind of, he would officially be a bloke you'd like to sit in the pub with of the show as well. I just invented a new title. I forgot to send this in for the revenge episode with Andreas, but maybe you can just pass it on. I'd like to formally petition Fujifilm that the next X100 be the X100D, just so we can listen to you two to talk for hours about how much you love the D. On a more serious note, I just wanted to shoot you guys a message of thanks. This corona business has been bad enough, but on top of that, my partner suddenly needed emergency eye surgery because her retina detached. Oh, I'm feeling nauseous at the thought, and pretty much blinded her from one moment to the other. She's doing better now after 2 weeks of bumping into every piece of furniture we own. But having to both socially distance and be a home nurse has been a tough order. Listening to you two Muppets every day has really been a bright spot in some otherwise dark days, so thank you. And I look forward to listening to you every Monday once again. Best regards. I'm going to put you down there in the You've Got Our Humour pile, which is a growing pile, just to the right-hand side over there, in case you're imagining the studio. And that's it for another day. Thursday tomorrow, back for Thursday. This week is whisking past.
Only 4 left.
Thursday, Friday,
4
Saturday,
more of the
Sunday.
dailies.
Yeah.
Is it 4 or 5?
Yeah, 4 more. And then back to Mondays from June the 8th. And it sounds like back to Mondays with Kev here.
Hooray!
Although not if it's true that I really was that third message in the...
Yeah, he definitely said that.
Did he? Okay, I'm going to go and watch it. See you tomorrow, Kev.
Bye-bye.
The FujiCast is an independent loading zone production.
Goodbye, sweetheart. Well, it's time to go. We're back tomorrow with another show. Well, unless we're fired, we'll talk to you then. Goodbye, sweetheart. Goodbye. Goodbye.